Hey there, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast. This is episode number 35 with Morgan Johnson. Super cool episode. She is a huge Harry Potter fan and a higher ed professional that works in a really unique organization. So we talk about that a bit and just all the things that she's consuming and all the things that are capturing her attention at this moment. A couple of podcasts and books and shows and all that good stuff. So definitely really appreciate Morgan sharing all that she did and giving us some time here for the show. But just enjoy this episode number 35 after this brief message from our sponsor.
Hey there, listeners. It's an honor to have our good friends at SwiftCake be a sponsor of the podcast because I've seen their work firsthand and it's truly unlike any student leadership training I've experienced. They've been voted Best Student Leadership Program unprecedented 5 times, so you know they must be doing something right. As a bonus for our listeners, SwiftCake is giving a $500 discount off their normal speaking fee if you mention Higher Ed Geek when you contact them. I highly recommend their trainings for your campus as your students will be talking about it for months afterwards. It's really great stuff. Check them out, swiftcakehq.com to learn more and let them know I sent you. Now, back to the show.
So we'll get right to it here. So I really appreciate you making time for the podcast here. I know we've kind of crossed paths, or I think been sort of digitally in the same spaces of sort of the kind of higher ed geek spaces that exist online. So I'm excited to learn more about you and talk to you more. And we'll start out here as we always do. If you just want to introduce yourself and kind of a brief version of your professional journey and how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Morgan Johnson, and I currently work at College Housing Northwest in Portland, Oregon, which is a not-for-profit organization that is a private-public partnership between Portland State University and Oregon State University, in which we do property management for college students. And so I didn't exactly anticipate that this is where I'd end up when I went to college. I decided that when I was in middle school, I wanted to study graphic design. And so that's what I went and got my bachelor's degree in at the University of Northern Iowa. Mm-hmm. While I was there, much like a lot of people who are in higher ed and student affairs, I was involved in a lot of stuff. I was an RA, a tour guide. I worked with the Alumni Association. I wrote for the school newspaper, but my crowning jewel of my time there was being the female campus mascot, which was absolutely amazing experience. And while I was in a handful of campus jobs in graphic design, I was doing design through some different student organizations. I realized that I didn't really want to do that long term. I really love art and design, but I didn't want to do it, for my career anymore. And so I had, that fantastic token advisor who asked, have you considered going into student affairs? And so I did some research into that and decided to go to grad school. I did my master's degree at Bowling Green State University in Ohio and did some work in the campus activities office with parent programs and then also in the Career Center. And when I finished my program there, I moved out to Portland, Oregon to join my partner. And that's how I ended up at College Housing Northwest.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll speak generally, but also I'm just very curious about the, you spoke, highly of your time as a mascot. So I guess give, that brief sort of synopsis of like what that was like. Like, did you seek it out? And like, I guess how long did you do it while you were in school? Or maybe like a fun anecdote about it, because I'm just very curious to hear about that.
Yeah, where I went to school, it's a secret. So they had kind of covert auditions with the mascot advisor and some current mascots. The dean of the art department at the time also does performance art and was in on the audition process. And so we had these secret auditions in 3 different levels, and I made it to the final round and was brought on just the year after that they actually debuted the female mascot. And so it was really exciting to get to unveil her in her marching band uniform, side by side with her brother, and, get to, be on the sidelines at football games, like really the best seat in the house. But it was really challenging because I had to keep this secret for the last 2 years of my college career. I was able to tell a couple people who I knew would be really suspicious as to why I stopped going to sporting events. But the coolest tradition with all of that is on commencement day, the people who had been a mascot get to wear the feet from the mascot suit. And it was just amazing to see the reaction of all of these people who had no idea for the last 2 years that, one of the Panthers on campus was somebody that they knew. And so it was really cool to do this really amazing thing that so many people love on campuses across the country, and kind of get that behind the scenes look into athletics and school spirit. I was a cheerleader all 4 years in high school, and so it was kind of a weird natural progression to end up being a mascot in college.
Gotcha. Well, I feel like some campuses have these like quote unquote like secret societies that are just kind of like honor societies or something, but almost just like being a mascot is like this secret society. Like it's very exclusive, and you have to keep it secret, like, because I think sometimes it's sort of like a wink like, oh, you're in, like, because I know like Rutgers had like it's like Skull and Bones or something like that, and it's this old society, but it's essentially just kind of very high achievers, and they have a ceremony. It's not really secret. Maybe it was at one time, but I mean, that's the whole idea of the mascot, is you just sort of like see the character. You kind of have to just sort of believe in that, and you really did have to keep the secret, which that's very, very interesting. But it's something very cool experience, and something very few people have. But I guess, with that or all the other stuff that you did, maybe specifically during undergrad, like what do you feel like your college experience gave you, personally and or professionally, that still kind of resonates with you today?
I think what really was, the best part of college for me was getting the opportunity to figure out who I was. That's so cliche, going to college to find yourself and whatever else. But for me, that was really true, because there were a lot of opportunities in high school that I, took advantage of activities-wise, from 4-H, band choir, writing for the school newspaper, that ended up translating into my college career. However, there were a lot of things that I had as interests that I ended up being chastised for, or made fun of for, because I went to a really tiny school and there weren't, a lot of people to necessarily connect with about some of the interests that I had really wanted to explore. And being able to go to college with all these new people was kind of a push of the reset button. And so I was able to explore a bunch of different subject areas, and, try things like Dungeons and Dragons for the first time, and to really figure out who my people were and what my interests were and what I really valued in interpersonal relationships. Yeah,
that's huge. I mean, as cliche as it is, that is sort of my path as well. Is just, I guess, more so in the sense of like, just building confidence. Like, I found my identity in terms of like who I am is like, it's okay. Like, you don't have to try to be someone else. And like, I think, like playing Dungeons and Dragons, I played with my brother during like high school and early college years. I feel like it is an epiphany. Allows you to be very like creative. You gotta have to like, check your ego at the door. I would sort of liken it to like, it's like very specific, like improv almost. Like you really just have to like get in, like, imagine things and just like, get into character. And so, that's really cool. But so I guess, you can find yourself, you find a career that you want to pursue in higher ed. You're now working in a very unique organization that's sort of higher ed adjacent, partnering with institutions. So, what kind of keeps you inspired, keeps you motivated? What do you enjoy most about your current work? And if you want to just give kind of the basic details of how, your organization operates.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, College Housing Northwest is a nonprofit, which is really uncommon in regards to these higher ed adjacent property management types of businesses, because for most places they are businesses. They're out there to make money. But for us, it's really about providing an experience for college students that's somewhere between residence life and just generally living off campus in any, nondescript property management building. And so with that, I supervise a team of RAs. I have a resident council. I oversee a community space that our residents can reserve for study sessions or birthday parties or whatever else. And so we're trying to fill that gap between, when somebody either stops living with their family or no longer lives on campus and they go to live on their own for the first time. There is a lot of great transitional opportunities in which we get to engage with our students, taking the opportunity to talk through with them. What is a lease? What are you signing? What does it mean when you are living in a multifamily community and you have neighbors and you, need to abide by certain policies and procedures as are outlined in your lease? And taking all of those opportunities as learning moments. And so those are some of the most interesting parts of the process and the organization for me, that we take a look at this experience of, living on your own, living off campus, whatever that means to that student at that time, and trying to figure out how we can inject some adulting skills, I guess, into that experience.
Yeah, very interesting. And that's a lot of I think the stuff that people feel like is missing sometimes, of the life skills of understanding a lease and having the developmental experiences of living with a roommate and those sort of things. So, and it seems like I've learned of a few organizations that are like those property managers partnering with institutions, and maybe they literally are building the community and then running it in coordination with the institution. And it seems like they are hiring for a little bit more of that kind of residence life experience, and kind of having it be kind of like a stepping stone versus making a huge leap from living at home or living on campus to then living out off campus. So that's very interesting. And I guess to clarify, so are the properties that you have, are they just apartment complexes, or are they group houses, or what's sort of the format of the living space?
Yeah, we have a couple buildings that we ended up building on our own that are just your typical apartment complexes, and a couple that we've acquired over the years. The property that we have at Oregon State is actually the remodeled on-campus hotel. So we really look for spaces that are near campuses that would be an easy commute for students, because we know that commute time is valuable. And it's all your kind of standard apartment, anything from studio to 2 bedrooms. So if you want to live by yourself, that's great. Or if you want to have some roommates, split the cost of rent and share those spaces, that's also an opportunity that our buildings provide.
Yeah. And I feel like I see that a lot too, because it's hotels are if one becomes vacant or something, it's a perfect residence hall. It's
exactly.
It's kind of almost built to that, and you can tinker with it a little bit to kind of optimize it for our purposes. But that's cool. When I guess something else I'm curious in terms of the development part, do you still do conduct processes, or how does that kind of work? I guess how much of it is, if you had to sort of equate a ratio for the partnership with the institution, is it pretty 50-50? Do the RAs technically work for the institution or the organization? I guess some of those, I'm curious how those kind of things work out.
Yeah, by and large, we're independently owned and operated with a specific partnership with the institution. So for us, all of our RAs and other employees are employees of College Housing Northwest, and our conduct processes take form in-house. We don't partner with institutions in that way. In fact, we have to abide by, everything that comes around FERPA. And in return, when campuses might be seeking information about students, we have to abide by landlord-tenant law and fair housing law, which can be an interesting, line to balance on. But as far as conduct processes go, going back to that leasing, learning, educational moment piece that I mentioned earlier, we we like to stay in touch with our residents in the event that they get a violation for either smoking in their apartment or making too much noise, or, they have a pet that they're not authorized to have. And at a certain point, after they get, a couple of the same notices, we ask them to come into our office. We have a chat with them, get to know them, talk to them about, what our staff has observed and documented, and using that as an opportunity to talk to them about living in a community and the impact that has on their neighbors and our staff, and talking to them also about the impact that it might have on their rental history. Because a lot of people who are living in our apartments are living on their own and renting for the first time. And so they don't necessarily have a frame of reference of, when they move out of here and they want to go live somewhere else, that they're going to call us up and ask, what kind of tenant were they? Did they pay their rent on time? Were they quiet? Did they smoke? That kind of stuff. And using that conversation as an opportunity to help them think longer term in regards to their rental history.
Yeah. It's fascinating. So we could talk, I guess, like the whole episode about that, but because I guess it's different too. Because I think some partnerships like that will, it leans a little bit more where it's like it's university staff in the building, like student staff. They do it still just like room and board, so it's just one lump sum or whatever. But like, it's good to have that. Yeah, like you have to pay a monthly rent, and you have to, live up to your leasing agreement and that sort of thing, like to where I guess it's just taking a different shape, because there is obviously like a student code of conduct and like student handbook. It's the same idea of like you have kind of agreed to these rules and all of that. But I think it takes that sort of form and shape of what the student would experience as they are, graduating and, moving to a place to live while they work. So yeah, really interesting stuff. But it takes some of the like the best parts of student life, of that, like, like developmental learning moments and all of that, of kind of like scaffolding them as they, build their own life to, again, not have it be this huge leap and like a huge difference where they're not realizing, they're making some poor choices that will linger with them for a while. So cool. Well, very interesting work. I appreciate you sharing a bit about that. But now we'll kind of go to the fun, personal stuff of like what you're geeking out about. So obviously, you've discovered stuff like D&D in college. So I don't know if you're still into that or what, but just kind of what are you geeking out about currently? Is it stuff that you've discovered more recently? Stuff that you've always been into? Just kind of thematically, what are the things that are grabbing your attention lately?
I have been a huge Harry Potter fan since I was in 5th grade. At this point, I've had more of my life with Harry Potter in it than I have had without it. I've been to Harry Potter conventions. My partner and I went to see the play in London last year, and we're going to see it on Broadway in a couple months. I did some of my first cosplaying this last year at Rose City Comic Con here in Portland as Dolores Umbridge, which was a blast. And so I'm, putting my feet into the cosplaying waters a little bit as a result of that. And so, Harry Potter is just a huge part of my life. Recently, as in these last 3 or 4 years, I've really gotten into listening to podcasts. So this is really amazing to be a part of a podcast because I listen to podcasts almost constantly. I know that a couple people on your show have mentioned My Favorite Murder, which is one of my favorite podcasts as well. And I listen to so many. I recently got into Good One, which is a podcast from Vulture, in which the host talks to different comedians about a joke that they wrote and what their thought process was, and what that joke means to them and to their audiences. I've also been really interested in this podcast called Hackable by McAfee, in which they talk about different things in our world that have the potential of being hacked and kind of break it down to see how easy is it to hack this and what are the implications of that. In fact, there was something in which they talked about, the technology that our fob readers, use and how easy it is to hack that. And I've been able to, go back to work and say, oh my gosh, did you know, all of the vulnerabilities technologies that that come around, having RFID and fob access and whatever else. So Hackable, not necessarily the best podcast if you're easily paranoid, but it's definitely interesting to think about the implications that the technology around us has, and what we might not necessarily think of as gaps in the system.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, it's just been kind of a sort of just a phase, I guess, right now, is that like really getting into like digital privacy, because it's certainly just kind of a zeitgeisty topic right now. But I think it takes that shape of like, especially within higher ed, like you were mentioning, like, there's a lot of sensitive information that we have to be conscious about how we're sharing. But then like, human beings are often very reactive. So like only after something gets hacked, we'll be like, oh, we should, this is the same thing with like a natural disaster. It's like, oh, well, we had a flood, so we'll just like prevent that flood from ever happening again. But it's like, well, that flood may never happen again. Like you might have a storm that comes in from a different angle, or, it's more windy than rain, or, and it's just like, you kind of react to the last thing. And I can imagine, and like getting hacked, you react to the last thing. But if you're like, kind of geeking out about like, oh, interesting. Yeah, like fobs. Like, I didn't think of that, but yeah, that's certainly a vulnerability of like, if you I'm sure they might talk about like, ATM card readers, like things that can like clone and like duplicate the information, or like they pull it out. It's like if somebody's beeping in, like it's attached to a profile that does have other information sort of associated with it, even though it's just this simple like, okay, ID number, whatever, like, do you have access to this? Like it's a simple transaction that kind of happens when you beep, but it does, I'm sure like if you kind of breach something, it, it's probably going to be bad news. So, it's like cool to kind of like, I mean, I didn't even know that podcast exists, but that's good on them to, kind of talk about that stuff. And probably a lot of different, relevance to different kind of people, whether it's, higher ed or somewhere else. So that is a good recommendation. I might go spy one of those episodes. But I guess, any of the things, maybe especially Harry Potter, that seems like a especially resonant thing for you. What is that, given your life? Like, how has that positively contributed to your life that it like sort of garners this, ongoing, just passionate, sort of fascination that you would, could venture the world, experiencing Harry Potterness? Because I will say, we had a company meeting, like retreat that they brought everybody out to in Orlando, and like Harry Potter world is amazing. I mean, I'm not even like the hugest Harry Potter fan, but it was like super immersive. It's just this world that, I want to be a part of. So that was really awesome. But I guess for you, like what does it give you that sort of is kind of most resonant?
I think for a lot of people who are around our age, there's that aspect of literally growing up with Harry Potter. Like when I discovered Harry Potter, I was 11 years old. And so, as the books were coming out, as the movies were being cast, I'm about the same age as the actors who are Harry, Ron, and Hermione. And so that, I think, creates a specific kind of emotional attachment for me. But I've also been able to really connect with amazing people in the Harry Potter community. And I, in fact, do some volunteer work with an organization called the Harry Potter Alliance, which frames himself as the Dumbledore's army for the real world. And they do a lot of really amazing campaigns. They've been doing a lot of great work for the LGBT community. They've been petitioning Warner Brothers to do, things like sell fair trade chocolate because of the issues with non-fair trade chocolate and the working conditions of the people who manufacture that. And so it's been really amazing to connect this fandom with some really positive not-for-profit work. There's a local Portland chapter, and there are chapters all around the world that take this mission of this organization that is tied to a specific fandom and also to a variety of other fandoms to do some really amazing practical work. So this community that I've been able to build, and then also this way that I never would have imagined that fandom could give back to our world, have just been so rewarding to engage with through the Harry Potter community.
Yeah. Well, and something I have to give a lot of credit for, because it's also cool how they're I mean, I'm more of like a movie, TV kind of buff, but because now they have like the Incredible Beast movies coming out. And then, like I said, like Harry Potter world, and I'm like a huge Star Wars fan, but I have to give them credit because like Star Wars is like finally catching up, like, you know, since Disney acquired them and they're doing like their own little land. It's just like, I think they've just garnered so much appreciation again for that world that they've created, that it does create these deep connections. And I think what they're starting to get better at, I guess, is sometimes like the representation, but like it has, you know, with like Dumbledore as this like chief character that I think like was one of those first times for me, like in a, you know, the geeky interest, it was just sort of blindsided, like, oh yeah, like Dumbledore's gay, just like, oh, what? Like, you know, and I think they're still kind of working on it. I know that some people are having an issue with like, you know, how he's represented in the Incredible Beast movies, but like just the idea that like it was, you know, doing that sort of thing, and like at the very least the world that they've created and sort of the themes and stuff is just, I don't know. I think again, Star Wars is kind of catching up now that they're kind of resetting with these newer movies, but yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, because it's just one of those things that like, yeah, like people will really get into, and it's great that they're kind of channeling that energy into good ways through that organization. So we'll definitely link out to them to have folks check out. But so I guess kind of, you know, in this geeky theme, if there's anything, you mentioned a couple of podcasts, so we'll definitely link out to those too. But anything that you are reading, watching, and or listening to that you want to name drop so we can include it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'm currently reading I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara, which is the book about the Golden State Killer that she was working on when she died. And so her husband, comedian Patton Oswalt, and a couple other true crime researchers that she had been working with assembled the book that she was working on. And I had purchased it before the suspected killer was caught about a month or so ago. And so I'm slowly working my way through that. And it's absolutely a fascinating read for anybody who's interested in true crime. But I also watch a lot of television. My goodness, I watch a lot of television. So recently, my favorite shows have been Silicon Valley, which is just absolutely hilarious. And similarly on HBO, I loved the first season of Barry. Bill Hader is a hitman who ends up going to acting classes, and it's such a bizarre and absurd premise. And the season finale was one of the best season finales on television I've ever seen. But speaking about a season finale, or really a series finale that I can't stop thinking about, The Americans wrapped up just a couple weeks ago, and the series finale of that show was absolutely phenomenal. It's a show about a family living in Washington, D.C., who are Russian spies during the Cold War, and the series goes through their life, trying to make a normal life as Americans, but also having the secret double life in which they're trying to gain information about, what the American government is doing so they can share that with their home country. And the final season was just so good. I highly, highly recommend it.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard good things. I think sometimes it's like knowing that the whole book is complete kind of like the TV show. I could be like, okay, yeah, now I can just go through it all, and now I can just sort of I guess not have to wait too long for new episodes. It's all just there. But yeah, that's all good stuff. And yeah, I guess we'll just wrap up the episode as we always do. Just some things or thing that you are looking forward to in your job, life, and or the world.
So I am just a few weeks out from starting RA training. So I have a group of 5 RAs that'll be starting the first week in July. So I'm really excited about that. But outside of that, I'm really pumped for a couple of movies that are coming out soon. Won't You Be My Neighbor? The Mr. Rogers documentary comes out this next week, as well as the Incredibles sequel. The Incredibles is my favorite Pixar movie, and I've been waiting for so long to get this Incredibles sequel, and I'm so excited to finally be able to see it.
Yeah. I booked my tickets a while ago. I'm excited for it too. And I mean, those are two. I assume just very heartwarming movies, just nice positive vibes, and I think that's what I like about. I mean, I guess it's getting a bit more spread out, but just having a good movie to look forward to see in the theaters, that's the best. So. yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up there. Appreciate you sharing all that you did and everything that we mentioned that I can find. We'll link out to. But yeah, just really awesome stuff. And I really appreciate your time and just have a good rest of your week.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dustin. You as well.
This podcast is a proud member of the ConnectEDU Podcast Network, bringing together diverse voices and thoughtful discussions to the higher ed community. Check us out online at connectedu.network or on Twitter at ConnectEDUPod.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast.